This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
If you're an older person, perhaps you've said to yourself, the kids these days, what's wrong with them? And if you're in Gen Z or perhaps younger, you might well have questioned the wisdom of old people. A study from the University of California, Santa Barbara finds younger generations are judged by older generations to be deficient in the traits in which the older happen to believe they excel. Chris Santis, an independent organizational behavior practitioner, speaker, and author, says differences of any kind sum it up in the title of his newest book, Why I Find You Irritating. He joins us for this Biz News Interview podcast. Chris, many people who have family businesses wonder why that other generation, whether it's the younger generation or that older generation, just doesn't understand them. You have done a lot of research into generational differences. Tell us the quick 30-second elevator pitch definition.
Well, generational differences are the distinctions through which you see the world through your own lens. And that's sort of predicated on the experiences that were unique to you growing up. When I say you, I mean the collective you. We boomers, you and I are boomers, we saw the world through a lens that is different than those who follow us. And so we interpret their actions through our lens, and that's how we judge them.
And that's what makes working together, be it in a family or in a business situation, somewhat irritating, correct?
It does. In fact, that would be the title of my book, Why I Find You Irritating.
Which, by the way, we've decided around here is going to sell 10,000 copies just based on the title.
I submitted 37 titles to the publisher. And they said, this is the one we like. So I said, okay, if you like it, then I like it.
It's a dandy title, but tell us what it means.
Well, what it means is that we are irritated by the others because they are not us. And as I said before, it's not just boomers being irritated by the young. The young are irritated by us because we want them to be us. And I'm of the case that we should be accommodating each other as opposed to changing each other.
Now, generational differences have gone back probably to the days of the caveman and the caveman repairman and his son or daughter who wouldn't go along with him.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I make the distinction between generational differences in the modern times and stages of life. You see, a stage of life is, as a young child, you're more likely to take more risks simply because you're exploring the world. As you get older, you get more conservative. So there are stages of life that are consistent throughout humanity in terms of the duration of time. Generational differences is really about, are there significant shifts in terms of what you are experiencing as you grow up that changes your view in a way that is different than a generation that follows you. So it's about the significant changes.
Chris, what got you into this? It seems like a part of research that a lot of people have overlooked.
I got into this because I work in consulting a lot, and I speak a lot. And so when I was dealing with these consulting firms and law firms, about 18 years ago, I noticed the next cadre of young people who came into the workplace were markedly different in how they carried themselves and how they acted with those people that they were working with. Now, at the time, management always would say, well, get them to be like us. And so that wasn't really effective, but they were significantly different in their interactions, not necessarily in a bad way, but they were clearly more assertive than I was when I was their age. And I can explain where that comes from.
Yes, please do, because that might be a key to solving it.
Yeah, well, a lot of it comes, for instance, in our world, Doug, we are children of what's called permissive authoritarianism. I mean, our parents raised us in a way that, look, we did what they told us. We didn't get a vote. I don't know if you ever got a vote with a vacation or anything like that. No, we just followed the rules of what they said, and we went along with it. That was as true in school, and that was true in the work we did. Now, the youngest generations are children of what either called concerted cultivation supervision or co-piloting. And the idea here is they're children of dialogue. You see, they've been engaged, so they get a vote at the table. You remember when you were at the dinner table and there's a dinner, maybe there's a family dinner, and you started talking? Well, their first reaction was, why are you talking? Why are you talking at our table? Now we engage the young, and this becomes the habit of how they have an exchange. So there's an expectation of a conversation. So when I give you an order as a young person, I want you to do this, they'll say, well, why am I doing that? We view that as a challenge. They're just really simply asking, give me the explanation. You see the difference between us? Because we would never have asked the question.
And if you have to give them the explanation, it requires a longer, literally longer dialogue between you and the explainee.
Yeah, and you know what else it infers? It infers a negotiation. And so they're saying, well, that's interesting. I thought we'd do it this way. And you're going, oh my God, who's paying your bills? I'm paying your bills. So they view this more as, well, what's going on? Why? I call this incongruence. Why are you reacting to me when I'm simply trying to engage you in a conversation? And you're going, this isn't a conversation, this is an order. See,
I had a manager friend who once said, well, that's why they call it work.
Exactly.
So how do you take advantage of that to move the organization along to a desired goal?
Well, the first thing, this is where I when I speak to people, I say, look, you first have to understand who you are, and how then you understand a little better how you would interpret the actions or words of another. So stay where you are, because everybody's bringing their own contribution to the workplace. It's just that it's from a different perspective. And I make the case that the broader the perspectives on the team, the more likely we have eliminated blind spots relative to what we do. So each of us can make contributions unique to our perspectives.
It's not like the enemy is firing live ammunition over your head at the time, though, is it?
Right, exactly. Now, there's a time for orders and so forth. By the way, this is another point I try to make to people, that most work rules are implicit. And so only when you violate them are you aware of what they actually are. And the young don't play well with ambiguity or guessing. So in that sense, they really simply want to know what the rules are. And if you state the rules earlier rather than later, I think you'll get better cooperation.
So that company handbook that so many people just kind of get and toss is pretty important when you come right down to it.
Well, it's good to share what you know about how you operate. And the phrase there is transparency. Just tell them. Now, we were never privy to transparency. If you guessed right, you moved ahead. So there's some resentment on our part as people in charge, saying, why am I having to bend over backwards to accommodate you when no one did for me? But they're an output of, quite frankly, these children are an outcome of how they were raised, and you were the parents who raised them, so you have some obligation in terms of how you interact with them in the workplace as well.
Oh, that's called karma. What goes around comes around, I guess.
Exactly right. I will also say these young people are probably the most civilized of all our generations, meaning that they are less likely to violate crimes, do drugs. They participate more in society, except for joining things. But in that sense, we've raised them well. And my advice to a lot of management is, what you have done in the home with your children, just do it in the workplace with your younger colleagues.
It sounds pretty simple, but when it comes to managers, there are a lot of managers seem to be at least mentally stuck in one rut.
Yes, well, part of the challenge there is, how do you become a manager? You become a manager through the observation of those who managed you. And so we are one generation off in terms of how we manage relative to what the needs are of those who follow. So there's a disconnect using, well, what worked on me based on who managed me does not work on them based on who I manage.
And thus the sense of irritation and frustration.
Yes, across the board. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was going to say we're missing one of the generational groups which everyone always misses, and that is Gen X, because there is a sensibility there that's a difference as well. See, that generation is very interesting. They fell through the cracks. They're smaller in numbers, but their experiences growing up were unique to them in the sense that they were what we called the latchkey kids. So if you were of this generation and your parents were both working or you were on your own more, you're a generation that just figures it out. In fact, you're probably the most independent-minded of our generations, whereas the people that my boomers, we tend to be a little more team players, and then those who follow us, the millennials, the youngest, are tend to be more collaborative in their nature. So when you have this bookends around you, team players, collaborative, and you're an independent individual, there's a unique sense of friction in the sense that why can't all these people just figure it out?
And there's probably many a reason for that, including having to work remotely for the last couple of years because of COVID. Explain how that factors in.
Well, that's interesting because, again, we each have our own set of needs. But let's take the Gen Xers for instance, in the COVID. They're the only generation, in my view, that it was designed for a pandemic. Because they were always in the notion of figuring it out anyway. This is just another circumstance to figure out. Whereas when you deal with the boomers, I think we're dealing here with the pandemic is a habit issue. I have come into the workplace for the last 35 years, and now there is no workplace to come into. So I'm doing this at home. Now, when you deal with the millennials, we have this is a sort of a bifurcated issue. One is I don't have mastery of what I do, and so I need to be sort of attend to others. But at the same time, I really like the flexibility and independence of my situation. Work anywhere, anytime. So that has that's sort of a paradoxical situation they're in. But as I said, each generation is dealing with it as they would to who they are.
As a consultant, if you were to walk into Elon Musk's office this week, after a week or so after he said, return to work or find another job, what would you tell him?
Well, he is saying what about 75% or 70-some percent of CEOs are saying is, we need you back in the office to do this. We need you. The problem I'm having with that kind of statement is, what do we need them for? Is this an issue of productivity? Is this an issue of culture? Is this an issue of quite frankly, some CEOs are working remotely and they lose all the glamour of their role. You see, where's my staff? Where are the people where's my special chair? I get the big table. My point here is that there's a lot of factors at play here. When you just say to people in a sweeping sense, without explanation, you have to come back, it's going to cause resentment.
It's going to be difficult to recruit younger workers, I would think.
Yes, I think, once again, the cat's out of the bag. We have, according to the economists, we've launched about 5 years into the future as a consequence of this pandemic in terms of how we work. So when you have this, when it's been on offer for 2 years, it's hard to take something back. I'm a believer of more of a melding. I think we do need human interaction. We are social creatures. And this technology, while wonderful, it is not the same thing as being able to see you, hear you. In fact, when you have this very little screen and you only see somebody's head, it's fatiguing because what we do is we read the whole person in terms of how they convey the message with all the body. And quite frankly, nuance is lost in a virtual setting. And if I'm going to teach a young person how to be brilliant at their job, there's nuance involved as well. So we have to share that.
And I guess when you're face to face, it's much more easier, I should say, to grab the person and say, hey, look at this.
Yes, exactly right. This is what you're calling the water cooler or the collisions. I'm running up to. See, if I'm in accounting, you're in HR. I might never see you in a virtual environment because we're not relevant to each other in the day to day. But if I have these collisions, all of a sudden things might happen, unfold, and then we build relationships, which is part of what culture is.
How do you sell that to a manager?
Sell what, Doug? Sell the
idea that a lot of good stuff happens around the water cooler.
Well, managers already believe that to a great degree because now it's the middle manager who has a different life circumstance. If you're in a young family or if you have a working spouse, this idea of great flexibility is quite attractive. And the other challenge we face is if you have mastery of the job you do, you don't require, in essence, the interaction of another. But when you don't have mastery, you certainly need a teacher who's more present than far away.
And that far away can be literally around the world, I suspect.
Around the world.
Brother.
And I think we're not in a place yet where we can say what kinds of jobs lend themselves to remote learning in the sense that I can do this remotely and develop versus what kind of jobs do I need to be present to really watch the teacher.
Now, you talk a little bit about what's called transactional labor market impacts.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, in my book, when I talk about this, I talk about the evolution. We are, Doug, you and I are probably products of the company man. And the company man was, look, you find a really good place to work and you try to sort of ride that out till retirement. And the inferred covenant was, I will work hard for you. I will make sacrifices for you. I will go anywhere in the country you want me to go. And you will then in turn take care of me. And then when I retire, I will get a pension. That was the covenant. Now, what happened is, when we hit the 70s, after what's called the Great Compression, that was when society was all compressing to the middle, from the 40s to the 70s, we started to have downsizing, right-sizing, and all of a sudden these jobs for life disappeared. And the covenant was broken, and now it became more of a transaction. I'll work for you if I get something in return from you. And so what we've done is that has sort of accelerated to now where the millennial or any young person's going in for a job, and they'll say things to you like this, Doug. Well, what is your vacation policy, or how quickly will I get a promotion? What are my when will I get a raise? And they're asking for you. By the way, had you asked for those things as a young person, you would have been exactly like, you don't want this job. We don't want you either. You see? And then we blame these young persons for not being loyal. And quite frankly, this is another misnomer. The young are loyal to who they work for, not to the company. So you have to express loyalty to them in return. So the transaction becomes more intimate.
And now, one other thing, and we're really just kind of hopscotching around here. Because
I like that.
Do need to read this book. You talk about one of my great pet peeves, and that's the performance review.
Oh, gosh.
Why don't you like it? I could go on for days, but tell us why you don't like it.
Well, first of all, it's not reflective of actual objective performance. It's reflective of the opinions of people, and those opinions, when you have subjective opinions that are I will say, quite skewed, and then you have a system where they're rating people in a skewed capacity, and it further skews itself. So what it does is it is not, if you have people that are diverse or if you have people that are working remotely, all of a sudden this performance appraisal system has those who are in the office review and those who are not review, which will be different. So performance appraisals are not real reflections of actual performance. The other problem I have, it commoditizes you. You, Doug, I'm going to review you across 10 things. Frankly, the work you do doesn't require those 10 things. You know what you have to be good at? Interviewing, drawing out, listening, drawing things from. Those are the things. But if I review you and saying, well, Doug, your writing skills aren't up to speed. So now you're spending time learning how to be a better writer, when in fact, that'll never serve you. So what we should be doing is designing performance appraisals that reflect the actual work you're doing and not the possibility of work you might be involved in based on what the role describes. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and it just solidifies, at least in my mind, that these things were great back in the 1800s, I suppose, when you were doing a spinning loom or something like that.
Well, remember the company man, Doug. The company man, Doug, you were interchangeable cogs. You could go anywhere. So you had to be prepared to be compared on all these other things. And so I'm going to move you from accounting to HR because that's what we did, right? We just moved you around. And so with that, this performance appraisal was broadly sweeping, and we knew you were going to keep you. So we knew you were going to keep you. So you just had to keep, do what I tell you to do and learn. Whereas now we don't keep people the same way. You see, we don't do that. It's a transaction. Well, I argue, prepare people to succeed in the work they're doing and leverage the strengths they have in the work, because work today is a team sport.
I like that phrase. We should put that over the doors of many a business.
Yeah.
Chris, what would you like to add that we haven't had a chance to talk about?
Well, I would add that we have some shared history. You are from Euclid, Ohio, and I am from Sharon, Pennsylvania, and so we have. You won't know me, but you were the big market for me because you're right out of Cleveland, and I was closer. I was just over the border. What we share was between us was Goulardi. Do you remember Goulardi?
Oh my goodness sakes! Yes, that. Hey, for our listeners and viewers who were not did not benefit from Goulardi, he was a local television personality on Channel 8 who apparently Channel 8 had a bunch of really dismal movies they were able to afford to buy licenses to broadcast, and they were mostly horror movies. And so somehow along, this poor booth announcer came up with the idea of he'd become Goulardi and host this thing, and it became the hottest thing in Cleveland television history.
Yes.
Probably ever. Nothing has reached that level, I suppose.
And I bring this up, Doug, because it's part of what I will call the flashbulb memories that shape us. You see, there are, again, Goulardi's a minor event. It was a big event to me. But Goulardi was a minor event, but there are larger events like the landing on the moon, the Challenger disasters. And children of that, young children have that period of awakening where they start to look at the world and the things that they see start to shape them. So I saw hope. I'm a boomer. I saw hope. I saw abundance. So I saw these moments, and that starts to shape a view. Now you have young children today who are on these red drills in these school systems, the violence and the guns and all of that. That shapes a view as well. And we're going to have repercussions as a consequence of that. So one of the points I'm trying to make here is your view is shaped by not only what you hear, but what you see, and then what you incorporate into who you are going forward.
And one more thing, would you give our listeners and viewers perhaps a website where they might find out more about you?
Yes, thank you for asking. My website is CP DeSantis, Christopher Peter, DeSantis.com, CPDeSantis.com. The book itself is called Why I Find You Irritating, Navigating Generational Friction at Work. I'm so grateful that you allowed me this opportunity to share that with people, and I hope they get something from this book.
Believe me, many a company could send that around to every manager they've got.
I'm hoping. I've been in probably about 800 companies so far, so it's been very good.
Well, you still have about 8,000 to go, and I hope this helps.
Thank you, Doug.
You've been watching the Biz News Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. Thanks for watching.